Former President Jacob Zuma, that is, has pleaded not guilty on all the charges against him, including corruption, money laundering and racketeering related to the arms deal.
The case now postponed until the 19th of July for the legal heads of arguments to be prepared.
I'll ask you to stand, please. You have followed the charges that have been put to you now from the indictment, am I correct? Yes. And no doubt, in consultation with your legal representatives, these charges have been explained to you. You understand what they entail?
Yes, I do.
May I ask you then as to how you plead to the charges that have been put to you, which are respectively counts 1, 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 to 18, with the sub-counts and alternatives that have been read out?
Yes, I heard them.
How do you plead to them?
I plead not guilty.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Meanwhile, the former president's lawyer, advocate Dali Mpofu, presenting Zuma's request for the prosecutor, Billy Downer, to be removed from the case.
Advocate Mpofu says Downer lacks independence and impartiality, and Zuma feels he won't get a free and fair trial.
I give notice of my intention to raise a further plea in terms of Section 106(1)H of the Criminal Procedure Act 1977. For that reason, for the reasons that are set out in the plea explanation, Mr. Downer should be removed as the prosecutor in this case, as he has no title to prosecute. There are facts and circumstances involving the conduct of Mr. Downer and the NPA generally relevant to the protection and interpretation of my rights under Section 35(3) of the Constitution, for which it is necessary that Mr. Downer be removed as a prosecutor in the case. 15. Furthermore, there are facts and circumstances that give me a reasonable impression that Mr. Downer has conducted himself in this case in a manner that lacks the independence and impartiality that is necessary for a lawful prosecution. Examining his role in the totality of the facts and circumstances of this case, Mr. Downer has failed to uphold the standard and prosecutorial independence and impartiality needed to secure that my trial is fair and conducted in accordance with the Constitution.
Well, a lot going inside court, the legality, a lot going on outside court, the politics. We're joined now by the advocate Romeo Ntumbeleni, a legal analyst, the political analyst Barry Hanyane. Mr. Ntumbeleni, if I may start with you, good evening. I mean, when we look at an argument that is being presented now by the defense that the prosecutor must be removed, I mean, presumably this could be quite a long argument. They would have to bring, well, evidence of wrongdoing or evidence of some sort of agenda on the part of the prosecutor.
Okay, Steve, I think thank you and good evening to the viewers. Let me just go against the grain and say that let me agree with the submissions that are being made by the former president and his legal representative that there's no title to prosecute in terms of 106(8) of the Criminal Procedure Act. Let me say, you know, for instance, we give that to him and we say the judge agrees with him and then he grants that application for the removal of the prosecutor. That's one leg of the argument. And the second thing that has to be dealt with is to answer the merits of the case, whether there's a case or not to answer. So if you are done there and you have to ask for an acquittal or a discharge, you know, you still have to deal with the merits of the case on its own. You might say that the prosecutor is not fit. There is an apprehension of bias and the judge agrees with you. As far as I see it, this is a new step-aside rule being introduced by the former president himself. It started at the Zondo Commission, and now it is cropping up in these proceedings in court.
Advocate Ntumbeleni, when we take a look at what a part of the former president is arguing, just this issue that Advocate Billy Downer does not have the legal standing to prosecute this matter, in very layman's terms, what does that actually mean when he says that?
Yeah, no, thanks, Kathy. He simply says that, due to the conflict of interest that you have in the matter, you have become so much involved into the matter that you qualify to actually be a witness against me and not a prosecutor. And he has made reference of why he says so. He says you were leaking information to the public. You submitted an affidavit in a case for the DA, which was against me, and it created an apprehension of bias against me. And I think that my rights to a fair trial in terms of Section 35 will be impacted by that. And I'm saying, let's say yes, we agree with him when it comes to that, and the judge says, there's that apprehension of bias, and then the prosecutor has to set aside. Does it end there? Because the problem is that now he's shifting the onus on himself to prove whether there's any substance or any credence in the allegations that is actually bringing before court. You cannot just say that without substantiating it with evidence. And I'm sure a lot of commentators have already said that these are matters that have been ventilated previously by the court. But I'm saying, for now, let's give him the benefit of the doubt and say we agree with that position that Downer has become so much involved in the matter that he can no longer see the light of the day. Let him step aside. Where does the matter end?
Professor Berihanyane, I mean, you're talking about the legalities, but there's a lot of politics to this. Outside court today, the suspended Secretary General of the ANC, Ace Magashule, the MKMVA spokesperson, Carl Niehaus, both of them, well, facing possible charges within the ANC, internal disciplinary charges, for their conduct outside the same court last week. Bit of a risk for them to be there today?
Yeah, good evening, Stephen. Good evening, Casey. Good evening to your viewers as well. It does, in a sense, draw the line amongst the factions in the ANC to say, one, there is a faction that would want to see the ANC being renewed, and this must translate into real actions. But then, of course, there is a faction that is hell-bent on somewhat wanting to vie for power by all means necessary. Whichever way you characterize that faction, today that faction is faced with a number of charges. You can talk about the suspended SG, who himself is awaiting trial at some stage, and of course is having trouble within the party itself. Then, of course, there are other characters that are on that camp. And I'm afraid it's beginning to send somewhat of a very strange message to everybody, not only ANC supporters, but everyone who is watching the unfolding developments with a very keen eye, to say, for once, indeed, the ANC is factionalized.
When one looks at the way in which the proceedings outside court today took place, and perhaps we compare them to last week, and notwithstanding the statements from the NWC yesterday, what do you make of what seems to be a more pronounced position of support, in particular from the ANC's Provincial Executive Committee, their members, and just the province in general?
Well, Casey, look, it doesn't surprise us. There is an element of political persuasion of a kind within the ANC. We've seen this. The leader of the province, Mr. Zigalala, was sent by the former president to go and convince now Deputy President Didi Mabuza to say, is it possible for him to throw support behind the NDZ camp? So political shifts within the ANC has become a norm, and over a period of time has been institutionalized. I wouldn't be surprised at that. What is beginning to emerge, though, is that radical politics within the governing party seems to want to gain traction, of course representing the kind of clashes, perhaps ideologically as well, as much as is part of the now fashionable conflict called factionalism.
Mr. Ntambaleni, I mean, obviously there's a lot more law to come on this. It could, from what I can see, be quite some time, just until this one issue, a preliminary skirmish, if you like, around the identity of the prosecutor is cleared up. I mean, it could take a while before we actually have witness testimony.
Yeah, and Steve, I'm sure you're not surprised. You know the Stalingrad tactics that has been used previously. So, this is not surprising. It's going to take time. Downer himself has indicated that the document that was sent was a voluminous document. It's a 1,000 odd pages document that has to be given to the councils. And I've seen that the NPA has sourced outside counsel, in Vemtron and his team to actually try and answer those voluminous papers that needs to be dealt with. It's going to drag out. And the moment you start with the nitty-gritties of the trial, although in the real sense of the word, the trial has actually started because there was a plea that was entered, which is a plea of not guilty. You might find that the moment you are done with this trial, the former president is 8 years old, and you are now saying that he's not supposed to go to jail based on age, and you must ask for clemency if the court does not find in his favor. So you will have a non-custodial sentence that is being imposed at the end of the matter. So the stakes are very high.
Professor Hanyani, from a political perspective, is it going to be difficult for the ANC in terms of determining how to respond then to even the organizing that is going to accompany the appearance of the president, the former president, during this period? Because it's very clear that that organizing is only going to increase with time.
Yeah, Casey, look, I'm beginning to observe that those that we thought are non-aligned within the factionalism quantum are now starting to take sides. I mean, the provincial SG of the ANC was seen today, and there was less booing compared to the previous occasion. Zigalala himself was there, other members of the PEC, Madame Gumede was there as well. There is an increase amongst the prominent figures to throw their weight behind. I don't want to read too much when it comes to issues of the crowds, because the allegation of rented crowds may very well feature prominently when one needs to measure this kind of support. So it's not something that is tangible, that is easily measurable. So I would rather play very cautiously on that front. And let's see how long will this support withstand the numerous possible court appearances that are likely to come forth in the near future.
Romeo Ntambeleni, Professor Barry Hanyani, thanks very much indeed. We'll